So again, guys, let's begin by welcoming everyone tonight to our webinar, Promoting Elementary Inquiry, Helping Students to Develop Their Own Questions. So important for our students today. We're excited today to have Ms. Julie Holland, and I'm going to introduce her in just a minute. I'm your host, Melissa Knowles, and our presenter today, as I said, is Julie Holland. Let me let you know a little bit about her, and I'm going to have to use her bio on here. Julie has 16 years experience in middle and high school as an English instructor in both Alabama, where I'm from, in fact, very close to me, and in now Missouri. She has a master's in administration and secondary principals certification. She has a K-12 reading certificate, which goes into what she's doing now. She is currently in her 7th year in the St. Louis Public Schools as an instructional coach and literacy specialist at an elementary school. So Julie, I am excited to turn it over to you for our presentation tonight.
For that introduction. And before we move forward, that was a little bit about me. If everyone who has joined us tonight would just like to post a little bit about where you are. I'm assuming we're all elementary, but maybe not. And Melissa might be able to just share some of those from the chat with us.
Absolutely. Yes, we'll be using the chat tonight, so feel free to add in any comments or questions in there, and I will present them for Julie. So Michelle Kimpson is from Richland 1, Columbia, South Carolina. So Richland 1 must be your school. Awesome. So Columbia, South Carolina, we have Lisa from Houston tonight. She teaches 4th and 5th grade social studies.
Great. Thank you all for sharing. So we're just everywhere tonight coming together to talk about inquiry with our young kids. Thank you so much again. So let's go ahead and get started then.
Julie, Corby popped in, and we've got the other side of the United States, Los Angeles.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Way to represent the West Coast for us. That's fantastic. So let's look at our objective for the night. Just as we move forward, we want to take time to become familiar with some instructional shifts and strategies that are going to help promote inquiry in our classrooms and hopefully help our students develop their own questions as they grow as learners. So let's begin with a working definition of inquiry. If we think about what inquiry is, inquiry invites students to explore academic content by posing, investigating, and answering questions. But the key here is that in an inquiry, the skills that are developed through the research process are just as important as the content knowledge that the kids are gaining during the research. These are lifelong skills that we're starting to teach. So it's not always about just finding the right answer. There are many benefits of inquiry, but there are strong arguments for choosing that inquiry-based approach over a more conventional model of direct instruction. And according to a brief from the Center for Inspired Teaching, these benefits can be summarized in these 3 broad strokes. Number 1, inquiry teaches students to pose difficult questions, and it fosters the desire and skills to acquire knowledge about the world. Number 2, inquiry allows students to take ownership of their own learning. We often hear about that, but inquiry is one way that we can really hone that skill. And number 3, inquiry allows students to draw connections between the academic content that we know they need and their own lives, which can be particularly important for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. So how do we go about shifting our classrooms to be more about that student-driven learning instead of the teacher-led instruction? First of all, we have to change the culture of the classroom by modeling curiosity ourselves. So number one, as the teacher look at subject matter as a person, that's going to help us think about it in a whole new way. We want to look at it as a person, not as the teacher. What would pique our curiosity? What would inspire us to want to learn more about it? Number two, we want to explore our students' interests. Why do we think this would appeal to them? How can we connect it to their learning? And my puppy seems to want to express his curiosity tonight too. Number three, how can we engage them in authentic dialogue about things that matter most in our life and in theirs? And finally, how can we build a culture of curiosity? Do our students feel free to ask questions? Sorry for that pause. Let's see if we can keep going now with a little more quiet in the background. So, sometimes this starts with us learning to stop trying to be the expert on everything in our classrooms. We know our kids have a lot of questions. We want to just answer them. Sometimes that's the fastest way for us to get to what we think we need to do. But in a book called Why Don't Students Like School, Daniel Willingham notes that it's the questioning that stimulates curiosity for our kids. Being told the answer just completely quells that curiosity before it can even get going. So when we start a new topic, we might think to start students off with a question that actually encourages them to do their own seeking for the information, rather than jumping straight to those answers. Next, we need to think about how we can provide lots of opportunities for questioning and discussion in our classrooms. I don't know about you, but one surprising observation that many of my own teachers have noticed during this virtual and hybrid learning is the actual reduction in student talk. Now, I'm not going to lie, at first that seemed kind of like a pleasant change from our usual very talkative elementary students. But then we realized just how much our students were really missing out on learning from one another. So now more than ever, our students need those opportunities built into their learning time to explore, to ask questions, to have discussions, and have a voice in their learning. So it's up to us to be even more aware of giving the students opportunities to ask questions and take time to discuss ideas. So I imagine that most of the suggestions that you see posted here are probably not new to you. These are just reminders of the importance of building these strategies into our instruction, whether we have our students in the seats or in a virtual setting. So number one, build in those targeted pause points in our instruction for students to respond to those open and closed-ended questions. It's easy to just kind of keep driving through when the kids are quiet and when they're not popping into the chat with questions. Number two, when possible and when it seems appropriate, use multiple grouping options. Create small groups or pairs or triads and get students talking. Number three, slow down. Again, we're so in a rush sometimes to get through everything in our day and feel like we have to check standards off of the list, but we have to build in time after we pose questions for responses and kind of open the floor up more for follow-up questions from our students. Give them that think time. I love this idea. Ask Instead of saying, do you have any questions, either before you release them to independent work or as you move on to the next point, ask, what kinds of questions do you have? It's just that shift in their mindset that asking questions doesn't mean we're confused or that we don't understand something, but we want a deeper learning, a deeper understanding. So it's, again, shifting the culture of the classroom to it's good to ask questions. And finally, when possible, when it works in the lesson, use some collaborative structures like those Kagan structures that frame how students interact with one another. Sometimes we put kids in little breakout rooms or with a partner and we just say, okay, I'm going to put you in a breakout room and I want you to share. And then if you check in, there's either silence or one student is doing all of the talking, or they don't know what they're supposed to do. So giving them a very specific instruction during that time makes everybody accountable and helps them all engage in that learning together. You know, thinking is hard work, really, and that's why we don't like to do it too much. It's hard work. But if we can add in fun opportunities for thinking, whether it's about the content or a non-content specific opportunity during the day, again, it allows our kids to express ideas. It gets us where we know them a little better. And again, it's building that culture of questioning. This was one really fun activity that I found. It's called What's the Question? And you as the teacher, let them know, it's kind of like playing Jeopardy. Watermelon is the answer, so what's the question? And it's very open-ended, and you can see kids can, it come from anything with what's red that can be white, kind of like a riddle. What's delicious? What does my dad smell like? They're hysterical, some of them. So again, make it a fun thing. This would be a great opener at the beginning of the day, or a great way to close their day, or something they can just go to throughout the day when they have a moment. So as beneficial as student voice is in the classroom, building that culture, we also know that sometimes opening up the floor for questioning can be like kind of opening the floodgates with little ones. There's never an end to the questioning when they build on each other. So we know that they can go way off topic, and we need to have a plan for managing student questions. What can they do with them instead of interrupting or getting way off track? Well, again, some of these things are great for in-person learning. We've experienced parking lots where kids get to take sticky notes and stick them on a poster all day long as they come up with a question, and it's not an appropriate time for them to ask it. They have an opportunity to put it somewhere where the teacher can respond later. Using those, what we know, what we want to know, and what we've learned charts, those KWL charts, they can fill up that whole middle section with what they want to know. And again, we might find divergent areas for them to explore that we didn't think of as the teacher. And exit tickets are a great way for them to ask questions as well. So as long as we have these tech tools and platforms in front of us, and our kids are going to be probably forever using some sort of hybrid learning, we want to think about what's available out there. Well, obviously the chat feature is a great place for kids to post questions without interrupting the flow of a lesson. If you've used Nearpod is a great way to interject polls and questions during your PowerPoint presentations where the students can respond. It's a great way to check for understanding, by the way. If you use Microsoft Teams, there's actually a collaborative space within the class notebook that kids can use. Padlet is out there where kids can post questions or comments via videos or images, and it's kind of like creating a comment on a virtual corkboard. Flipgrid is another way for students to pose questions with video responses. And of course, there's always multiple opportunities to use a shared whiteboard. So many of the things that you might do in a classroom, just ways to approach them differently in a tech world. So after we've built a positive culture for that curiosity, we've given students opportunities for questioning, we've utilized tools and structures to help keep questioning manageable, now we can actually focus on modeling, on how questioning can actually lead to deeper thinking and learning. And really, this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. The inquiry process engages our students in learning that new content because they want to answer questions that spark their curiosity. So the inquiry process can be used in any subject area, and it's basically 5 steps. Number 1, we pose a question. Usually the teacher comes up with that nice, compelling question, but the students can too. Number 2, we conduct research. Number 3, we interpret the information that we've gained from that research. Number 4, we share that information with others. That's all part of the learning process, wanting to share and having an opportunity to share what we've learned. And number 5, students or learners have that opportunity to assess what they've learned, to reflect on their learning before they move on. So the key to that impactful inquiry, whether it's guided by the teacher or student-led, is that great starting point. That starting point has to be a larger, compelling question. And if you think about what a compelling question is, a compelling question needs to reflect an enduring issue or concern or debate. And in social studies, it needs to draw from multiple disciplines. And a compelling question needs to reflect, again, on some quality or condition that you know your students actually care about and that honors and respects the students' intellectual efforts. Why are they going to want to spend a lot of their time, a lot of their hard work searching for the answer for your compelling question? If you think about this compelling question and the criteria for it, this helps answer that age-old question that kids always pose to us, well, why do we have to learn this? When am I ever going to use this information? If we can capture their attention, they're going to want to know why. And we don't have to answer that question for them. So I love this quote, and this is the way we really need to think about the inquiry process. If we start with the big questions, the little questions will follow. But if we start with the little questions, those who, what, when, where, why, how, that's usually where our students end. So those little questions are often what we call kind of those right there fact-based questions. And as educators, we know that we're always striving to move our students from those lower level Bloom's taxonomy, where students are just kind of recalling information, to those upper levels where they're taking that information, synthesizing it, creating something from it. But it's kind of a really fine balance here. We can't reach those upper levels without building the foundational knowledge. So we can't expect our students to ask and search for answers to those deeper, more meaningful questions without the content knowledge to be able to do it. So the factual knowledge has to precede the skill. In other words, this process of asking a question and finding the answer is not just linear. More content knowledge leads to more questions, which may lead to more research. So you'll notice that throughout this inquiry model, students can move fluidly, and you as well as the teacher might move fluidly back and forth as you collect information, you connect it, you look at it in a new way. And then you go back and find out more questions if you're so compelled. So we always want to be encouraging our students to think about flexibility and their new thinking. So not only do we need to model the use of the compelling and supporting questions, but especially for our younger learners, we have to give them the tools to develop those questions as well. Sometimes all our students really need is a little support to move from those, what we might call thin, right there kind of questions, the basic who, the what, the when, the where, the how many, to those thick or think and search type of questions. So the questioning itself is truly cross-curricular. Building the questioning throughout the student's day can become really second nature when they can apply these same kinds of sentence and questioning stems and strategies in science, in ELA, in math, and social studies. So when we are modeling our own questioning, when we're creating those pause points, again, we do have to have some of those thin questions. We have to build the background knowledge. But are we modeling for our students those thick questions that are harder to answer, the what ifs? Do you think? What is your opinion? So again, we want to model that balance, and we want to teach our students to think in both of those realms. Well, we've given students ample space now in their learning environment to ask questions. We've introduced the concept of thick and thin questions. We've given them a roadmap for inquiry. But even with all that, with our younger students who are new to inquiry, it's still better to begin by modeling that inquiry and guiding our students through several inquiries to prepare them to be able to navigate their own. So what does a teacher-guided inquiry look like? Well, it can build background knowledge of the topic before letting the students take the reins. The teacher starts with an overall guiding question. You as the teacher also know what you want your students to understand beforehand, and your students know up front kind of what the outcome of the inquiry is going to be. So here's an example from a young citizens chapter for grade 1. This is chapter 4. And you can see that in this guided inquiry, the students are focused on learning about what makes a town. Throughout that entire chapter, they're given supporting questions about what a town government does, how the laws are made, what are different towns like, how do people help their town, how does the surrounding affect it. The students are led through the same content here, and the teacher knows what the answers are going to be that you're looking for, but ultimately the student's definition of a town is going to be from their own understanding. They'll have lots of background information to pull from if they try to define a town. And by the time they've done this kind of guided inquiry, then it's a perfect kind of jumping off point for them to do a student-driven inquiry. So in the final step of that inquiry arc, the students again have that opportunity to share their learning or take action. And that step is just, again, a natural progression from that guided inquiry to a student-driven inquiry. We can see in this model that the project at the end is a student-led inquiry. They're going to try to improve their own community through citizen action. They have to think of a need in their community. They have to think about the resources that are out there and how that improvement is going to, again, require more resources than the class alone can actually realistically accomplish. They're going to take the new knowledge that they have, their own compelling question, and new research. They're not going to be able to use that old research to answer this question, this inquiry, but it's going to help them know where to find the types of information they need. And they're going to research their own town to bring their project together. Well, we know that children have an abundance of natural curiosity, so we want to take advantage of it. how are they going to use their new knowledge? Can they make a difference in this example in their school or in their community? We want, again, our kids to see how they can connect the past with the present and how they might affect change in the future. So as we think about just our quick overview of some strategies and skills that are going to increase the inquiry in your classroom, I want you to ask yourself that question. How is the learning that we share today going to help you support your students and their questioning? So we'll just kind of leave the floor open, and if Melissa, if anybody has a question, we'll be happy to try to field them right now. Let's see.
That was fabulous. I like how you took it not only from just asking the questions and showing us how to develop those with students, but into them applying that question knowledge in their project. That was great. So yes, please add any questions, comments, if you want to answer that question that Julie posed for you to think about in the chat. We would love that. I'm going to go ahead and put the evaluation link. And if you need a professional development certificate, I am adding an email that you can just email and request that, and they will send it right to you. So again, thank you everyone tonight.
Yes, thank you for joining us in the discussion, and I hope that there are some things that you could take away and use in your classrooms.
I did have a comment to make. I have taught inquiry before in a K-1 looping classroom, and one of the things that I think is so valuable that what was shared was about the modeling. The teacher model the inquiry process first before handing it off to students. And so therefore you are scaffolding the students carefully into, investigating their own interests and questions. So that's a good reminder to make sure, especially in the beginning of the year, or, to start off by modeling your own curiosity as a teacher.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Again, especially if you've done inquiry, it's tempting to want to just jump right in and give them free rein. But we have to, again, as you said, scaffold that learning for them as well, so that what they do is worthy of their time and effort that they put into it, and that they don't go down too many rabbit holes on their exploration.
Larry had his hand up.
And I put it down, but I'll put it back up. But anyway, yeah. What I was excited about here is being virtual, how this will actually work. And I'm realizing that the dynamics is exactly what you said. Teachers do all the talking because it seems so easier, because there's so much going on. If everybody unmutes themselves, so you have to have a process. I think this is a good foundation or structure to have in the classroom, so that the kids will still be engaged, because I'm expecting them to do more of the talking than I do. It's just scary in the beginning, but I know it works because I've been trying it, and the kids really do take over. They want to talk, and they want to talk even more so now online versus in the classroom. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to go back to my peers and share this with them. Are we going to get the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Because I've been taking pictures anyway. But you made a comment, or you said something that I wasn't sure, that in math, ELA, science, and social studies, but my peers in the other subject, the specials, they always think it doesn't relate to them. And I was wondering if you could comment on that. For the Spanish and for the music department, the gym, the art teachers, the librarians. They don't think it relates to them. This is just for the core teachers.
Oh, no, I think inquiry in our specialty classes and our related arts classes would be, again, a fascinating approach for them. And again, it's not that it releases the teacher from work. It is a lot of work on the teacher end to prepare a strong inquiry and to know that you're going to put resources in front of the kids that are valuable and vetted for what they need to learn. But again, it's a process of letting go in a different way, and it absolutely applies to our related arts teachers too. They've got those standards. How we don't have to do an inquiry for everything that the kids are learning, but even if they want to start with one content, one standard where they feel like this is an opportunity for kids to get out there and explore, it's a nice starting place. Building one for the year, then maybe next year it's one per quarter, then maybe it's, again, I think people are sometimes afraid and think they have to jump in and do it all the first year they ever try it for everything that they teach, and that's a lot for the teacher and student. So I think in every content you can find at least one way to do an inquiry.
Absolutely. And as a librarian, I absolutely believe that you need to have reason for everything that you do. So it works for in my classroom also.
I know, for example, Larry, our music teacher is introducing opera to our elementary students. And I'm wondering how that inquiry model might make it a little more interesting for them if they found that compelling question, if they wanted to go find out about it and look at different sources rather than just having the teacher tell them what opera is. Being able to compare it to other types of music and other types of related art. So again, thank you, Melissa, from sharing your perspective too. But it is important for our students to want to know.
Absolutely.
And thank you all so much for sharing what's going on. And those of you who are already stepping into inquiries, we love hearing that.
I would like to add, I've been doing this for a long time because I always believed in teaching language arts and math through the content, science and social studies. And so I've been doing that for over 20 years. But I think that's the real key. But somebody brought this up recently that online, because we're all taking classes online trying to figure out how to best do this. And he broke it down to, it's also about choices. And so it's choice of subject sometimes, or, within a subject. Let's say you're teaching art and, pick a piece to read about, or it's about choice of product, or it's about choice of how you're going to get to this, answer the question. So I thought, so this really works into that quite a bit. So this was very helpful. I liked it.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great observation. I love that your explanation. You're right on the money. It's choice, student choice. How is it presented in the end? What do I do with this new information rather than just take a test? We can all put it in a multiple choice or short answer question test, but isn't there something more that we want our students to do with the knowledge, and how much more valuable is it to them, and how much are they going to remember it versus I learned it for the test and now I move on to the next topic. So thank you for sharing that.
Michelle said, yes, student choice.
Yes.
And I agree.
Yes.
Even for the social emotional side for our students, it gives them a little bit of control, which I think they absolutely need. So that was a great point, Corby. Thank you.
And again, it's kind of, flipping that switch in our brains from having to be the owner of all the knowledge and just imparting that knowledge to students versus, I think I read somewhere, I'm going to paraphrase this, but, we don't have to be Google for the kids. We just have to teach them how to use it in a way that's meaningful. So again, giving them choice, sending them in the right direction very carefully in these young stages.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, again, thank you, everyone. I'm just going to go ahead and say that we really appreciate you guys all coming out this evening, and it will conclude our session. If there aren't any more questions, we do have that evaluation to fill out. And don't forget, if you do want a professional development certificate, please send an email to help@socialstudiesschools.com. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you again, and thank you